Introduce you first to the candidates. They are from left to right: Timothy Nibbs of the Concerned Citizens Party, the Green Party nominee Ralph Ferrucci, the independent candidate and current Senator Joe Lieberman, Republican candidate Alan Schlesinger, and the Democratic nominee Ned Lamont. Tonight's debate will last 60 minutes and will follow debate rules that were agreed upon by the campaigns. The candidates will have 1 minute to respond to the questions with 30-second rebuttals. The candidates may not interrupt each other. There will be a 2-minute closing statement, but there will be no opening statements tonight. Please hold your applause until after the debate is concluded. Now, your panelists, news anchor Al Terzi from Channel 3 Eyewitness News, and Angela Dias, the news anchor of WTIC AM CBS Radio. Before we begin, I should point out that the podium position and the order of the questions were selected by a drawing prior to tonight's debate. And our questions are based on those sent in by Channel 3 listeners and viewers. The first question goes to Mr. Nibbs, and it is simply this: where do we go from here in Iraq? Should we set a timetable for withdrawal? Should we stay, or should we do something else?
We need to get out of Iraq immediately. Some would say that this will result in a civil war, but there will be a religious civil war in Iraq whether we stay or go. The only question is whether or not our troops are going to be in the middle of that. We had no constitutional, no legal, no moral grounds to go into Iraq to begin with. And when you're doing something that is fundamentally wrong, the correct thing to do is to stop, and stop it immediately. Whether or not Saddam had weapons of mass destruction does not change that equation. I believe, as the Jordanians do, that whatever he had is now in Syria, that he did have them. But he was not a credible threat to attack the United States. And the only time that we should use our military to attack another country is when we are attacked by them, or there's a credible threat of attack, and then we should declare war and go.
All right, Mr. Ferrucci.
I'm going to agree with him on that. We need to withdraw immediately. We had no right to be in Iraq. They have no weapons of mass destruction has been found there, and we have made the Middle East unstable. The longer we stay, the more unstable the Middle East will be. Iran is a problem. Israel has been having some conflicts with Hezbollah. No matter how long we stay there, it's going to cause a problem with the Middle East and with the Americans' relationship there. And we need to withdraw immediately.
All right, Senator Lieberman.
Bob, I've spent a lot of time over the last 3.5 years talking to Connecticut soldiers and their families who have served and sacrificed in Iraq, and I can tell you, based on those conversations, that no one wants to end the war in Iraq more than I do and bring our troops home, but no one wants to do it in a way that does not, more than I do, that does not compromise our national security or dishonor the service and sacrifice of our soldiers. And this is obviously a big difference between some of us here, including Ned Lamont and me. Mr. Lamont has said he would have voted for a plan in the Senate that would have immediately begun to withdraw our troops and brought them all out by next July 1st. That would be a recipe for disaster. I have been very critical of a lot of the mistakes the Bush administration has made in Iraq. That's why I recently, again, issued a 10-point plan to get the job done there, including the removal of Donald Rumsfeld as Secretary of Defense and specific new ideas for better training Iraqi forces so we can bring our troops home. We've got to end the war in Iraq, but we've got to do it in the right way that does not compromise our security.
First, I would like to thank WTIC and CBS for sponsoring this debate. You know, on Iraq, the military, our mighty military of America, has done such an outstanding job. They have done everything that they have been asked to do. No one can second guess what we have done and what the generals have done over there. The problem in Iraq is not military. The problem in Iraq is political. Now, we can sit there and we can prop up the Maliki government, or we can say, why not a three-state solution? Why not give the Kurds, the Sunnis, the Shiites self-governance with a national federal council to distribute the oil wealth. I believe the sectarian violence would then be brought to an end, and finally, our troops would come home. I am not running for president. I am running for senator. This is what I would offer the administration.
Time's up. Mr. Lamont.
Well, good evening, everybody. 3.5 years ago, President Bush rushed our country into war, and Senator Lieberman cheered him on every step of the way. Over the last 3.5 years, there have been a number of attempts to change the course, make sure that the Maliki government has all the necessary incentives to stand up and take responsibility for their own destiny. And along the way, Senator Lieberman has opposed all attempts to change the course. And here we are 3.5 years later with 140,000 of our bravest troops stuck in the middle of a bloody civil war. Colin Powell recently said, we've got to change course. Every course must have an end. The top general from Britain, one of our allies in Iraq, recently said we're exacerbating the insurgency. Our troops have got to come home. Our best hope for a stable Iraq is to give the Iraqis the incentive to stand up and take responsibility for their own destiny. And I have a plan to have them do just that.
All right. Well, let's go back for rebuttals now. Mr. Nibbs.
The rhetoric has been that we are taking the fight to the terrorists so they don't take the fight to us. But yet we've foiled terrorist plots around the world since we've been in Iraq. So it has not stopped their attempts to commit these terrorist attacks. Mr. Lieberman has called for Rumsfeld to be removed. Maybe that's because I read recently he's on the short list to replace him. And then once we bring the troops home, we can put our National Guard on our borders and truly protect us from invasion.
All right. Mr. Ferrucci.
We really need to pull these troops out right now. We cannot stay there any longer. I've heard people say, well, it'll lead to a civil war. You know, when we won the revolution, France did not stay here. They let us govern ourselves. We are going to sit there as long as it takes. We will never leave Iraq. We will never have them have their own government. We need to pull the troops out, pull them out immediately, and give them back their land, their oil, and leave.
All right. Senator Lieberman.
Well, we cannot and will not stay in Iraq forever. My commitment to Iraq is not indefinite or unconditional. We need to stay there as long as there is a reasonable prospect with our help of building a free and independent Iraq, which would be a whole different path to the future in the Arab world. What really should happen after this election is that all the Democrats and Republicans in Washington who don't favor immediate withdrawal but want to get the job done in Iraq get together across party lines and figure out the way to do that as quickly as possible. The president should lead the way. If not, Congress should.
Mr. Schlesson.
You see, this is what happens when you spend 6 years running for president and vice president of the United States. You begin to believe that you're actually in the executive branch of the government. See, I understand what I'm running for. I'm running for the United States Senate. I'm here to advise and consent. And what I'm suggesting is a real solution to help us get out of Iraq. No one on this stage is going to pull the troops out immediately. What we need to do is help the president, help the administration, help the Congress to come up with some sane answer so that our troops will come home naturally. That's the only thing that makes sense.
All right. Mr. Lamont, the final rebuttal.
Well, Joe Lieberman and George Bush both have an open-ended commitment to stay in Iraq. It was Joe Lieberman who wrote that piece in the Wall Street Journal entitled "The Troops Must Stay." It's President Bush who said we're going to let the next administration figure out how to do the redeployment. As long as that's the case, the Maliki government has no incentives to stand up and take responsibility for their own destiny. I say it's time for us now to hold their feet to the fire, and over the course of the next year, let them know that the American troops are going to redeploy and the Iraqis are going to stand up and take control of their own destiny.